Well, Arizona State went into the half, tied at 3 with UCLA, and ended up with a 3-point advantage, 23-20, to defeat the UCLA Bruins. Welcome into HouseOfSparky.com. I'm Zach Plotklip. I'm joined by co-managing editor Kalen Jones. Now, Kalen, it was a heck of a performance against a heck of a quarterback in Josh Rosen, and the defense looked to be pretty successful after a shaky performance against USC. So really evaluate how ASU's defense did in handling one of the best QBs in the country.
Well, Zach, they did a fantastic job, especially in terms of harassing Rosen and doing, sticking to a similar game plan to what they did to, last season when they faced him, which is really get after him. Yeah, I think we saw a joke on Twitter earlier. Antonio Longino said that all you got to do is really hit him, and then after that, Josh Rosen was a completely different quarterback, and that looked especially true tonight. ASU, actually, they were able to get after both of their quarterbacks, even Mike Faithful, however you say his name, forgive me about that. But they were consistently getting into the backfield, racking up 5 sacks on the night. The last possession, obviously, when Karan Crump made his huge sack, and then to Sean Smallwood and DJ Calhoun combining for the other one, that pretty much, explained the entire night, at least the defense's performance in terms of getting after the quarterback. And then even when you're talking about what they were to do against the run, holding them again, shutting down this potent UCLA rushing attack. Last year, they did a similar thing again with Paul Perkins, who came into the game as being touted as one of the nation's best runners, and then holding him to about, 40, 50 yards. They did the same thing tonight, limiting UCLA to only -1 yards rushing. So it was a pretty good performance all around.
You could kind of tell that ASU's front seven knew that if it got to Josh Rosen, it would be able to rattle him. You heard JoJo Wicker say that about the QB this week. Now let's talk about the secondary. They lost Kareem Orr in the middle of the game, obviously a big blow, but Marcus Ball really stepped up. He stepped into that safety spot. You just saw a lot of different pieces, including Mo Chandler, who played in his first game of the season. Just assess the secondary's performance overall.
It was very good, and that's what Todd Graham came out and said, despite giving up the 400 yards. I mean, you got disregard the stat sheet for a minute. When you look at what ASU's pass defense and defensively in the back end tonight, Marcus Ball, you talked about what he was able to do. Finished with 10 tackles, a pass breakup. He was really the enforcer tonight for ASU, even on that interception. We saw him struggle a lot earlier in the year playing in sort of a more linebacker role closer to the line of scrimmage, when you allow this guy to play free in the secondary in that sort of boundary safety role, which is termed as a bandit. He did extremely well tonight. Even looking at assessing what the other quarterbacks did, Gump Hayes is doing a fantastic job when you're not asking him to kind of tackle bigger receivers like Juju Smith in space. Even though he gave up the big run to Sosa Jamambo, he was responsible for missing the tackle in that play. But when you're talking about what he was able to do in coverage tonight against the UCLA receivers who were more closer to his stature, I think he matched up very well, including on the interception. They did a great job of really staying, fundamentally sound tonight, and they did a great job as a unit overall. And you're starting to see that the injuries, obviously with Kareem Orr being out, but having Liu Mokiola back, I think I said his name right this time.
There you go.
Having him back, and then having that communication between Ball and Gump Hayes, I think it looked extremely impressive tonight.
Yeah, Graham was saying in the post-game presser, he really got into this defense. He really challenged his defensive guys to wrap up and tackle better, and I think they did overall. And again, that turnover battle was really critical for them.
Yeah, they ended up winning the turnover battles 3-1, and it starts with what they were able to do with their front seven. Obviously tonight, Graham pointed out that he played to Sean Smallwood more of a 5 technique role tonight, as opposed to his regular D3 technique role on the interior of the defensive line. It allowed ASU to go more of a heavy unit. Rennell Wren playing the nose tackle role tonight. He does a great job of putting pressure on the quarterback from his role. So I think tonight you're able to see what at the 3 levels of the defense for ASU, when you talk about the defensive line, the linebackers, and the secondary, when they're all playing in sync and what they're able to do in unison. And I think they did a really good job, and they held UCLA, which has arguably the best quarterback in the country, only to 20 points.
Now let's flip the script. ASU struggled mightily on offense in the first half, only 68 yards. Josh Rosen wasn't the only quarterback under duress. Brady White had a hard time. There was a few drop balls, a few miscues. But how would you evaluate his performance before he went down with that injury?
It stinks, because you definitely don't want to see a guy who was getting into such a role. Obviously in the first half he struggled, 8 of 21. The interception obviously was costly, but I think when you look at what Brady White was able to bring for the offense, obviously you're not able to run the same RPO stuff that you're seeing with Manny Wilkins. They kind of were forced to stick to a more less vertical passing game, but they were trying and at least attempting to take these deep shots downfield. Once you saw him get in rhythm, N'Keal Harry, Tim White, who obviously had a monster game with 12 receptions and I believe 123 yards, when they're in sync, they looked really impressive. The passing game, especially in terms of attacking the middle of the field, they did a really good job of that tonight. But the passing game overall, I think it's going to look a little bit different with Dylan Sterling-Cole should he man the offense next week. But in terms of assessing the offense, they did what needed to be done.
You can see Brady White got really comfortable with that laser he had to N'Keal Harry in the back of the end zone. Between double coverage, really impressive. But what we saw with Dylan Sterling-Cole, and then when they went to the Sparky package, you don't really know what's going to go on. So do you have any idea what Chip Lindsey might do? Or does he just really need this week to figure out what he's going to do ahead of Colorado?
I think he's definitely going to need the week to figure out what he's going to do ahead of a Colorado team that's looked surprisingly good this year. But you have a decent quarterback, at least in terms of arm talent. Dylan Sterling-Cole is right up there with Brady White, and I would argue that he's arguably the strongest scorer of all three guys. So you might be able to attack more vertically moving forward. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But in terms of the chemistry, I think that's going to be the biggest thing, whether or not that chemistry lasts that we saw kind of develop over the course of the game with Brady White between Tim White and N'Keal Harry. If that can kind of translate into what Dylan Sterling-Cole is able to do with the other guys, we'll see whether or not that lasts going into next week.
Again, as always, plenty of questions after an Arizona State win. Who's going to start at QB? Who's going to be QB2? And what's the defense going to look like without Kareem Moore? What's his status going to be this week? But as always, you have to make sure you keep tuned in to HouseOfSparky.com for all of the coverage, recapping this game and previewing the next game against Colorado. For Kalen Jones, I'm Zach Pocklip. Thanks for watching.